what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to recap this week in cannabis news from May 31st to June 6th. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back and rewatch. I've tried to put all the facts and news in one place. That way you can watch episodes over time, learn about the budding industry, identify companies that you keep seeing pop up over time, and then take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with an update from Akerna, as Memorial Day weekend brought in over $234.3 million of cannabis sales, just under 4 million short of their prediction, which was 238 million, which tells us that Americans spent a lot of money on cannabis this past weekend, but also at the same time that Akerna's data is fairly accurate. So this shows that on Friday, May 28th, the start of Memorial Day weekend, was the third largest sales day for medical and adult use cannabis in 2021. With nearly 87 million in sales. 420, an unofficial cannabis holiday, was the highest sales day of this year so far, totaling 111 million, followed by 89 million on St. Patrick's Day, which was also the date that stimulus checks landed in most qualifying Americans' accounts. So the entire Memorial Day weekend proved to be a profitable one. Friday, May 28th, brought in 886.9 million. Saturday, May 29th, saw another 67.6 million. Sunday, May 30th, was 41.6 million, and then Monday, May 31st, rounded out the weekend with 38.2 million for a total of over $234.3 million. Holidays continue to be the big days for cannabis sales, demonstrating that Americans are turning to the plant's benefits in times of socialization and celebration, said James Arendt, business intelligence architect at Akerna. Our prediction report ahead of the holiday was over 98% accurate, which is very impressive, regarding total sales, as well as correctly predicting the highest traffic days. Dispensaries and cannabis operators should leverage data-driven insights like these to make strategic plans for their promotions, staffing, and overall businesses. So, great business model that Akerna is going to have over the years, but if you wanted to see the breakdown, we have the category sales, the demographics, sales by age groups, average order total, and average basket size. So, great to see that weekend was a success as we were anticipating, and we did get the report for Illinois' adult use cannabis monthly sales figures, and in May they brought in a total of $116.3 million. As you can see, in-state sales are here. We'll start on the left side. Items sold increased. So from April, we did see an increase in items. Now, in-state resident sales actually decreased slightly. So in April, we saw 79.9 million. In May, we saw 79.5 million, but that push, for a record-breaking month, came from out-of-state resident sales, from these residents who do not live in a state where they have adult-use cannabis. Therefore, they're driving to Illinois and giving Illinois the tax dollars that help boost them up over to a new record amount of sales. So this is great, but I wanted to just point out that if you add up all of these sales, you get $507 million so far after just 5 months. And if you look at last year, they did 669 million in total. So by the end of July, Illinois is already going to surpass 2020's numbers. That's a fact in 2021. And then this 507 million in sales in just 5 months is without adding any of the new social equity or new adult use dispensaries that Illinois just passed and will be implementing going forward. So that is a lot of sales, and more legal access points is only just going to increase the sales. So you gotta love seeing that out of Chicago. On to Nevada, we can see their cannabis revenues as well. A bit of a spelling mistake here, just notice cannabis revenue. But as we can see, last year was difficult, especially with COVID. That was where Nevada faced the most issues, where 2020 sales actually fell below 2019 sales. But as we can see, and just with time and with the U.S. getting vaccinated and with travel resuming and more people returning to Vegas, we can see already in March we saw a nice uptick to 96.9 million. In February of 2021, they did 73.1 million, and then in January they had their best month in a very long while, up to 83.3 million. But if we add these three numbers together, 96.9, 73.1, 83.3, we get 253.3, which accounts for about $250 million over just 3 months. So if we extrapolate that, there's a good chance Nevada is going to surpass $1 billion in this year. But if they don't end up growing and they just do 250, 250, 250, 250 over the next 12 months, that should account for at least $1 billion. But obviously growth should we should account for growth, so that is going to surpass $1 billion. Nonetheless, that would be Nevada's first month surpassing $1 billion. Great to see that. So love to see the strong growth out of Nevada, where adult use is returning. On to the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for Florida. Looking at progress from May 28th to June 3rd, we can see that they added about 2,400 more patients. Now, if you think about it, when there's a long weekend holiday, people are not going to be prioritizing signing up for a new doctor around those times. So that is likely why we saw a decrease in the average of about 5,000 new patients actively qualifying each month. But if we scroll down to the sales, we can see that they were strong, and Trulieve did end up selling more than a ton of cannabis, which is again 32,000 ounces. But in my last week's video, I mentioned that I was anticipating a lot of sales, but keep in mind, now that I think about it, Florida is just medical use, not adult use. So likely where a lot of Akerna sales came through and big Memorial Day sales came from states where there's legal adult use, so that you can spend and you can buy a lot of it as opposed to medical, where you're doing this for your own health and for your, to be able to survive. Nonetheless, we can see strong growth numbers all the way across the board. So, Florida does not stop, and just think about when this state legalizes for adult use. That's going to be a wonderful day. Now over to some tweets. I wanted to share this one from CannaVestments. Had incredible meetings with a number of portfolio companies yesterday. Some resounding takeaways. Don't bet against U.S. cannabis. Still early innings. Indoor beats greenhouse. Experience, scale, and access to capital is the name of the game, and institutions are waiting at the gate. This is a big one to keep your eye on, and remember that it seems as if institutions are well aware of cannabis. They're just, they're waiting on SAFE, or they're waiting on something that's legally going to allow them to start investing. Now, just wanted to add, someone asked, can you share any more color on the institutional aspect? Any managers using creative ways to get involved? Synthetics or offshore money, interest across the cap stack, or more debt to equity? Probably two main points. 2021 institutional investors' interest already far better than ever before, evident with Q1 capital raises, lots of new groups participating, and lots of groups sitting on the sidelines that are spending time to learn these companies now, so then they are ready to go. And I imagine that they're all just waiting for SAFE. But I wanted to show you a few things. So CannaVestments seems to be the account run by VG Investments. And if we click on this website here, I'm jumping back and forth, VG Investments, it is V. Gastovich Investments. V. Gastovich Investments is a Chicago-based family office seeking private investment opportunities in the burgeoning U.S. cannabis industry. And a family office, think of it this way, is a family that has $50 million to $100 million in net worth. Therefore, they can afford to hire their own investment team to do everything for that family. So they're dealing with high net worth investors. And so what I wanted to show you is that if we go to the About page, I don't know if you watched Wednesday's video, but at the end of the video, I added a interview from the Benzinga Investing in American Cannabis series that had two investors that were early in from 2013-2014. One of them was an equity manager. The other one was Nick Gastovich, VP of Gastovich Investments. So just connecting these dots were kind of cool, seeing that Nick is the same guy behind CannaVestments. But then at the same time, what's even cooler is we can actually click on portfolio and see which companies they got into very early. And we can see it's Green Thumb, Cresco Labs, some other brands here that I'm not aware of or that I just don't know, Verano, Can, which just partnered with GTI, and a few others. So as you can see, they're definitely heavily invested in the cannabis industry for these high net worth families, and just super interesting to connect those dots. But just want to reiterate how they're on the ground floor talking to the CEOs and the teams making all of this expansion happen, but highlighting here, institutions are waiting at the gate, and they're definitely waiting on SAFE, or some sort of language that will allow them to get into this industry. Now, Todd Harrison, Needham on cannabis. We expect U.S. cannabis industry to grow 20 to 25% in 2021, but expect MSO revenue to grow 90+%, for gross margin to be sustained at 55%, and for EBITDA rate to be above 30%. These metrics would be exceptional in any industry, but we find them extraordinary for any sub-industry in the consumer space. While the cost of capital remains high for MSOs, the $1.7 billion in secondary equity issuance for $700+ million in debt raised among the larger MSOs in the late 2020 and early 2021 has substantially improved balance sheets. The capital is currently funding higher levels of CapEx and kicked off a wave of M&A as MSOs seek to expand into new states or add to scale in existing ones. With operational capacity addition for the largest MSO skewed more to second half and a score of announced deals expected to close in the coming months, we expect revenue dollar growth to increase from the level experienced in Q1 2021. So they're expecting growth. That is Needham, an investment firm as well. So thank you, Todd Harrison, for sharing that. Then we go to his feature from Political Pro. U.S. Cannabis Recap sums up a solid stretch for the space, but make no mistake, this is a really solid stretch. Despite share prices not moving, this again is just giving us investors there's time to accumulate, because this has been a solid stretch, as Connecticut didn't even make their deadline, but we're actually going to see they might make it, which is coming up this Wednesday. Note from editor, a flurry of activity for cannabis legalization. Cannabis bills are seeing a lot of activity as state legislators start to wind down. Number one, lawmakers in Nevada overwhelmingly approved a bill to allow cannabis consumption lounges in hopes of attracting even more tourists to Las Vegas. So that is a precedent for lounges in all other states in time. 3 Republican governors, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, and Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed medical cannabis bills. And on the federal level, Amazon is throwing its lobbying weight behind the MORE Act, though whether that makes passage more likely is another matter, which probably doesn't. At the same time, we need the votes. But amid a lackluster growth in job numbers, workers laid off during the pandemic are finding new careers and financial security in one of the fastest growing industries in the US. Then we've got these quick thoughts from Todd Harrison on top of this article, which is definitely a new development that we're going to go through, as Senate Parliamentarian may have foiled Schumer's cannabis legalization plan. So we'll read that next, but I just wanted to highlight his thoughts first. So keep these in mind as we read through, because as we read through, it's not all bad, and it just sort of shows us now where we sit, as again, things change, putting us in a new position. The market already knows, because US cannabis is back at January levels, meaning this article is not going to cause the prices to go any further or to drop any further. This news is already priced in. Number 2, zero shot. Schumer walks away empty-handed. He's trying, but can't pass without support. So as much as he wants to get this done, there's a good chance that if Plan A falls through, we'd hope that he'd go with Plan B, which is safe. And keep in mind, number 4, it's still a state-led story, and fundies keep getting better. Federal legalization really doesn't change anything that's happening on the ground in the legal states, and the new legislation that would eventually remove 280E and allow them to uplist, removing 280E is just going to make the fundamentals better in general too. So just keep in mind that federal legalization does not need these companies to keep operating profitably. And then we got to remain patient, but you got to do you based on what your own plan is. So let's go through it. Senate Parliamentarian may have foiled Schumer's cannabis legalization plans. Does not sound promising, but it's not all bad. Senate Democrats just don't have enough of a majority to use the budget reconciliation process to their full advantage this year. There has been some discussion over the past couple months that Senate Majority Chuck Schumer might employ some clever finagling to bypass the 60-vote supermajority requirements to push through a comprehensive cannabis reform bill. As it stands, an old rule known as the filibuster is in the way of Schumer securing the votes necessary to make legal weed a reality. But if he could wrap it up in a budget reconciliation proposal, there's a chance it would pass with a simple majority. If the term budget reconciliation sounds familiar, that's because it was the only way Democrats have been able to get anything accomplished in the past few months. The budget reconciliation process allows the Senate to pass bills with a simple majority, 51 votes, basically voting a bill through the upper chamber without Republican support. This is how they passed President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, despite Republicans throwing a fit about how it would cripple America. The problem with this tactic, however, is the controlling party can typically only use it once per fiscal year, and they've already used one of them. But Schumer, leaning on Section 304 of the 194 Congressional Budget Act, believed Democrats had additional budget reconciliations coming to them. And if that was the case, he might try to include a long-awaited cannabis reform proposal into another resolution. Schumer admitted that was possible in a recent press conference. He told reporters that he'd confirm in the next few weeks, so this just means at the time he thought this was a possible route that he could take. The next move seemed contingent on a ruling by the Senate Parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough. Who is Elizabeth McDonough? Democrats soon received good news. In April, the Senate Parliamentarian determined that the party did, in fact, have additional budget reconciliation options at their disposal. The Parliamentarian has advised that the revised budget resolution may contain budget reconciliation instructions. This confirms the leader's interpretation of the Budget Act and allows Democrats additional tools to improve the lives of Americans if Republican obstruction continues, Schumer's spokesperson said, according to The Hill. Yet, it seems that Schumer may have over-embellished just how much authority these reconciliations would give them. A recent report from Punchbowl News suggests that the parliamentarian ruling puts strict limits on what Democrats can do with their newly greenlit options. The majority party, in this case the Democrats, cannot use reconciliation simply to avoid the regular legislative process, and there has to be reasons beyond political expediency for triggering the majority threshold, such as an economic downturn, the news source wrote of McDonough's decision. In other words, the parliamentarian said Dems can't use this as a shortcut. Now, I don't know where this basis for her decision came off of, or if she just decides this based on what she believes. I have no idea. But although Democrats thought they had 2 more automatic budget reconciliations for this year, McDonough's ruling leaves them with 1. So Schumer has only one shot at passing critical items, which means including cannabis in Biden's agenda. And trying to convince the president that cannabis legalization needs to be part of the deal probably isn't going to fly. We don't know that, but based on what Biden believes, probably. Biden's focus is on his Americans' jobs plans, American families plans, and Medicare expansion. All of this cannabis would definitely help with. Those efforts were initially supposed to be split between two budget resolutions, but now Schumer must find a way to get it done with one. Schumer would be hard-pressed to convince the Biden administration to squeeze in cannabis. After all, Biden isn't even sure whether full-blown legalization is the right thing to do, but that's his fault because he's still living in 1970. Even trying to force a revision to another budget resolution must endure the full committee and amendment process. That's where Republicans could swoop in and jam up a vote. Senate Democrats just don't have enough of a majority to use the budget reconciliation process to their full advantage this year. Any misstep at this point could blow Biden's agenda out of the water, so it appears that Schumer will have to walk a narrow line to further the greater good of the Democratic Party. This could mean that his highly publicized plan to push a comprehensive cannabis reform measure could be put on hold. It just doesn't appear that the Senate parliamentarian will allow the Democrats to toss any old issue over their shoulder and carry it to the finish line with the budget reconciliation process. Cannabis legalization will likely need to be done through regular legislative means and be subject to the GOP filibuster. Unfortunately, trying to legalize cannabis nationwide in this matter spells nothing but certain death, which is very sad, and it does obviously put on hold the fact of just the benefits of legalizing for, expunging records, giving personal freedoms back, and just for the goodness of humanity. That is why this sucks. But keep this in mind, waiting on others to realize that if Schumer doesn't have the votes for comprehensive cannabis reform, the odds of safe banking uptick in kind. So in exchange, if he can't get the comprehensive bill, a win for him would still be getting safe through a bipartisan Congress, I would imagine. New York is fully legal. Remember this. New York, which legalized at the end of March, New York is fully legal, but there can be no social equity in New York without functional banking, which SAFE would provide. And Schumer knows this. So it's possible, again, based on Todd's thoughts here, thinking that if the MORE Act doesn't pass and if the comprehensive bill can't pass, Schumer knows that SAFE is the last sort of option. So for America and greater humanity, by ending cannabis reform, this news does suck. But the irony for investors, it might be the best thing because that gives SAFE better chances of passing. This world that we live in, eh? What a wild place. On to some legislative changes. Civil rights groups demand Congress pass federal cannabis legalization bill this month. That would be great if they can. A coalition of major advocacy groups, including the ACLU and the NAACP, is urging congressional leaders to hold a vote on a House bill to federally legalize cannabis by the end of this month. In a letter sent to House leadership on Friday, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, LCCHR, a coalition that represents more than 220 national organizations, said that it's imperative to promptly pass the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement MORE Act, which cleared the chamber last year and was recently refiled. Since the House approved legislation last year, the circumstances of this past year have made the war on drugs even more untenable and amplified the voices of those demanding transformation in our criminal legal system, the group wrote. And LCCHR, which also includes the Human Rights Campaign, Anti-Defamation League, National Organization for Women, and People for the American Way, said that cannabis criminalization continues to fuel mass incarceration, deprive people of necessary federal assistance, and also leads to deportations for non-citizens. All true. And cannabis ending prohibition would fix that. Passing the MORE Act is currently the best available means to correct some of those harms, which is 100% true. So it's great to see this call to action from civil rights groups, but at the same time, if they don't understand the complexities of Congress, they can push for a vote as much as they want, but if the votes aren't there, it's not going to pass because you need to appeal to the other side. And so it's just a bit counterproductive, but at the same time, hey, let's hope that they can get a vote and some sort of miracle can happen. On to Connecticut. Apparently, lawmakers have finally reached a cannabis legalization deal with the governor. So following weeks of talks with Governor Ned Lamont's office, House Majority Leader Jason Rojas says negotiations now have a penciled-down agreement, but lawmakers will need to move quickly if they hope to pass this legislation ahead of Wednesday's end-of-session deadline, which is this upcoming Wednesday. So just wanted to add this. This is good news. Let's hope that they can get something done by then. But while the lawmakers gave some detail about the basic components of the proposal, the text is still not publicly available. So we don't have it in written form, but that is another one of the East Coast states. After New Jersey, New York, Connecticut is likely getting in line, all in 2021. And then Louisiana bill to legalize smokable medical cannabis heads to the governor's desk. So a Louisiana bill to allow patients to access smokable medical cannabis products is heading to the governor's desk, while separate legislation to decriminalize low-level possession of recreational cannabis is also pending final action in the legislature. So this is a good development out of Louisiana. It would mark a significant expansion of the state's current program if signed into law. As it stands, patients are only able to vaporize cannabis preparations via a metered dose inhaler, but they cannot access whole plant flower, and smoking is not allowed. So that would obviously give more benefits to the patients of Louisiana. Meanwhile, the Senate is also set to soon take up a separate decriminalization proposal that would make it so possession of up to 14 grams of cannabis would be punishable by just a $100 fine without the threat of any jail time. The House approved this measure by a vote of 67 to 25 last month, which is an improvement as these developments came weeks after an effort to more broadly legalize cannabis in the state entirely. This obviously just keeps the black market alive, but decriminalizes it, so, not necessarily a win, but small progress is better than none. On to MSOs. Very little news as they just continue to execute on the ground, but Verano maximizes New Jersey footprint with opening of Zen Leaf Lawrence, which would give them the maximum number of dispensaries permitted in the state, and it's its 78th active location overall in the United States. The dispensary is primarily located on Route 1, a main thoroughfare connecting New York City and Philadelphia, which sees over 100,000 cars pass through Lawrence each day, set in front of one of the largest malls in New Jersey and just 7 miles from the university campus in Princeton. The municipality recently opted in to allow adult use cannabis, giving Zen Leaf Lawrence the ability to begin making recreational sales when the program comes online. So that is a nice victory for Verano, getting in those key spots. We take a world tour. The Czech Parliament advances bill to liberalize medical cannabis. On Wednesday, June 2nd, the lower house of the Czech Parliament approved a bill of amendments to the country's laws governing the production and prescription of medical cannabis and hemp. So major stipulations of the amended bill are as follows. Medical cannabis may be cultivated by multiple licensed private groups who may also manufacture medical cannabis products. Export of medical cannabis will now be explicitly legal. The marketing of extracts such as isolates and tinctures will be permissible. The system of electronic prescriptions for cannabis will be updated to ease the process for doctors and patients, while hemp products with less than 1% THC will not be considered addictive substances, clearing the way for cultivation and production of products with these concentrations. So the bill has now cleared the tallest hurdle on the way to becoming law. The Senate and President must now consider the bill before the bill is formally accepted, but local advocates have high hopes on that approval on Wednesday. It means that the odds are good and that this will be achieved, which is great because it seems as if every Sunday there's a new European country that is becoming more open to advancing or to legalizing and liberating legal medical cannabis, which is great. On to Turkey. They experiment with cannabis crops to boost hemp production. While cannabis remains taboo topic, economic crisis means Turkey is trialing hemp for industrial uses. So economic crisis is pushing them to the brink, just like we saw in African countries last week. So Abdurrahman Dilipak, 72, is one of Turkey's loudest voices in favor of legislation as attitudes change and the country begins to experiment with reintroducing one of widespread crop. Cannabis has 1,000 benefits. This plant is generally a blessing of Allah. It cleans the air, water, and soil. And that's just true. He wrote in this column for Yeni Akit, a conservative newspaper, alcohol is more dangerous, which is also true. But fact is, there's not a single plant in the world, I don't believe, that soaks up more CO2 than hemp or cannabis. So imagine that if every country grew as much hemp as possible in the summer months, and then instead of burning coal for dirty fuel, you could burn hemp for clean renewable fuel. I see that as an amazing sort of solution to some of the problems we have, but obviously there's some big industry interests in the way that would not like to see that become a reality. Regardless, just saying what I believe to be true and what hemp can actually do. Industrial hemp was cultivated in Turkey's humid Black Sea region until strict anti-narcotics laws were introduced in the 1970s. Many people today attribute the change in policy to pressure from the US. Yeah, we're well aware of that. It was the US's fault that this became an illegal thing around the whole globe. Even now, cannabis remains a taboo topic, and penalties for recreational cannabis can be as high as 2 years in prison. While hemp paper, not as high as the US, while hemp paper and textile production survive, the last of these factories closed down in 2000, unable to compete with cheaper petroleum-based materials imported from places such as India. So imagine if the world wasn't just about profit, but actually just sustainability. Hemp would be much more common than the petroleum-based cheap alternatives that we've become so addicted to. Grappling with an economic crisis and searching for ways to diversify, in 2019, Turkey's President Recep Erdogan made a surprise announcement that the country would now take steps to increase cannabis production in the hopes of restoring the once booming hemp export industry. Now, the first crop of plants bred and studied by researchers has been harvested, and according to Selim Aytak, the director at Ondokus Mayas University's leading cannabis research center, the results are promising. We've been improving and breeding seeds since 2013 to cultivate a product with fine fibers for industrial use and decrease the amount of drug material, and so far we've had great success. We hope it can be used for medicines, food, flour, forestry products, ropes, textiles. All of that. Bringing back hemp can have a global impact as world governments look at reducing carbon footprints. It uses far less resources than plastic or cotton. Yes. So great to see Turkey taking this step forward as well. And hopefully, the world does open up to more hemp. And this one, as we head to the UK, 60 MPs and peers back calls for review of 50-year-old UK drug laws, basically just highlighting that the laws in the UK are a failure and it's a call for some sort of reform. 50 years from the introduction of the Misuse of Drugs Act, the chief executive of a leading UK-based charity working for drug reform has labeled the legislation a disaster. Good, yes. Some new blood coming in saying, hey, we failed, we got to fix this. This is Dr. James Nichols but Dr. James Nichols said the Misuse of Drugs Act has been a disaster. In the 50 years since it was introduced, we've seen both use and deaths rise dramatically. The UK now has the highest drug deaths in Europe, and the situation continues to get worse. So, public and policy health support have come together. More than 60 MPs and peers from across the political spectrum, as well as senior scientists, public health specialists, and former police officers have voiced their support for the urgent review of the Misuse of Drugs Act. And basically, why do they need this? How has it gotten to such a point? Well, in 2001, Portugal decriminalized all drugs for personal use. Since then, drug-related deaths, HIV infections, and associated crimes have all gone down and dropped. So in the UK, though, right now, this is what they're seeing. 2.5 million regular cannabis users. The Foundation's data also shows that cannabis use has increased from around 500,000 people to over 2.5 million, likely since this this act was introduced, while cocaine seizures have grown more than 600-fold from around 6K a year to over 400,000 kilograms. The UK also has the highest cocaine use rate in Europe, with 5.3% of young adults using it in the past year. Heroin use has increased from under 10,000 people to over 250,000, an increase of 240,000% or 2,400%. But while a growing number of campaigns are calling for the decriminalization and regularization of drugs, it doesn't have to be all drugs, but cannabis is a start. The government says there's no plan to legalize them. Labour MP Jeff Smith said the Misuse of Drugs Act was supposed to eradicate drug use, reduce harm, and keep people safe. But since 1971, drug use has risen dramatically in the UK. Decent people have been needlessly criminalized and had their lives destroyed. Those struggling with addictions have been stigmatized and punished. Thousands of children have fallen victim to trafficking and exploitation at the hands of criminal gangs, and we are in the midst of devastating drug-related death crisis. But at the same time, get this. Although they know that one of the answers was from decriminalization. Portugal decriminalized, and they've seen all of this drop. Then they say, while a number of campaigners call for decriminalization of all drugs, the government said it has no plan to legalize them. So as much as they don't want to see this happening in their state, they're not willing to do what's needed in order to get rid of it. So, hopefully this will just lead to some sort of cannabis law reform and then eventual law reform. But just wanted to point that out because at least, lawmakers in the UK are aware of just how big of a failure these laws have been, much like, more and more lawmakers in the US are becoming aware as well. As we return to newcannabisventures.com, a website you should definitely have listed in your favorites if it's not already, highlighting that first quarter earnings reports show strong and improving American cannabis industry fundamentals. So, the public cannabis company revenue and income tracker managed by New Cannabis Ventures ranks the top revenue producing cannabis stocks that generate industry sales of more than 12.5 million per quarter. This data-driven, fact-based tracker will continuously update based on new financial filings so that readers can stay up to date. Now, 44 companies currently qualify for inclusion, with 36 filing in US dollars and 8 in the Canadian currency, which is the same as when we reported a few weeks ago. We added Gauge Growth, which reported in American dollars, and removed Oxley Cannabis, which reports in Canadian dollars. Also, we've left Aphria in the Canadian section for now, but we will remove it when Tilray reports in July. So just wanted to highlight some of what this does include. Since our latest update, several companies that report in American dollars provided quarterly financials, including among the largest revenue generating companies, Cresco Labs, Air Wellness, Tilt Holdings, and Jushi Holdings, each of which reported revenue in excess of $40 million during Q1. As we discussed last month, American cannabis operators are scaling very well with strong revenue growth and improving profitability. The reports over the second part of the month reinforced in this view. And as we can see, Scott's Miracle Grow, which doesn't actually touch the cannabis plant, but they sell, just for example, I have a little arrow garden here, and this liquid plant food is something that Scott's Miracle-Gro would sell. So if you are growing cannabis at home, you're likely buying the sort of plant nutrients or food that it needs from Scott's Miracle-Gro. So that's why they're included. But then we've got Curaleaf, Green Thumb Industries, Trulieve, Cresco Labs, GW Pharma, Verano, and all other U.S. cannabis companies ranked by revenue. And if we look at the Canadian companies, we can see much fewer companies making much less quarterly sales. And if we just recap, on June, Canopy Growth reported a slight decline in revenue sequentially as it narrowly missed analysts' expectations for revenue, which was $155 million. They only brought in $148 million. Now, I also just want to point out that if we look here, Aphria only has $51.7 million in quarterly sales because they're only looking at Aphria's medical and adult use Canadian cannabis sales. But if we look at Canopy, that includes their adult use and medical Canadian cannabis sales, but then also their other consumer product sales. So not sure why they're including all of Canopy's in there and not all of Aphria's, but regardless, that just makes Canopy look like they're making a lot more than the other companies when a lot of these sales are actually coming from other consumer product goods, not just cannabis related. But just wanted to show you this because obviously you can see right here, quarterly sales. So if you take the quarter, multiply it by 4, that's going to be the full year of revenue that these companies are going to expect going forward. We've got the quarter-over-quarter growth, the year-over-year growth, their adjusted operating income, and when their next financials are expected, but I don't think these are actually legit. And once we get closer to that day, they'll announce that. But I just wanted to show you all, if you scroll up and you click rankings, this is how you find this ranking. So I would suggest you all favorite this page. I will do it as I haven't done it yet, but this is a great resource to have as any cannabis investor, wants to be able to see some sort of measurement. And then this is how also you can look at the company's revenues and their expected growth and compare it to their current market cap. So you can anticipate what they're expecting for total sales in 2021, their quarterly sales times 4, and accounting for a bit more growth to come, times 4, and then measuring that compared to their current market cap. That will show you which companies are overvalued or undervalued. Obviously, the lower price to sales compared to market cap means you're getting a better deal if you can find a company that has a much lower price to sales compared to much higher ones. And then just wanted to show you that this website, New Cannabis Ventures, we're going to go back to the old article because it features Alan at the bottom, but this website is run by Alan Brochstein, a CFA who got into cannabis early in 2014 as well, and he was one of the most recent guests on the Cannabis Investing Network podcast for episode 95. Patience will be rewarded for cannabis investors, featuring Alan Brochstein. So I would recommend listening to this episode as well, another great resource to get you further adapted and learn more about the industry. And lastly, this very timely and relevant tweet by Ian Castle, a microcap investor, stating, "Don't follow the institutions or don't go where the institutions already are, likely high-tech overvalued FANG stocks. Invest where they are going to go." And this is why I'm so happy that I chose the cannabis industry. Is there a more undervalued industry that U.S. institutions can't get into yet, but they want to? And clearly they want to. We know that. CannaVestments highlighting institutions are waiting at the gate. Todd and Needham, an investment institution, reiterating these metrics would be exceptional in any industry, but we find them extraordinary for any sub-industry in the consumer space. And why do they want to get in? Because look at these sales. Illinois is going to surpass 2020 sales figures by the end of July already. And it's really just the fact that the legislation that's in the Senate right now on the floor has not passed yet that is stopping those institutions from getting in. So it's just a matter of time, folks, and I wanted to show you this. And just to add to that, we have Surir Japan highlighting how any retail investor would think. That requires a huge research power and constant follow-up on the companies. Most retail investors without financial power do all their research online alone. That is 1, not good enough. 2, you are drowning in sea of conflicting information. How do you navigate it? You just do. And that's why I make these videos, so that hopefully you invest in the cannabis industry and then you can watch these videos every single week and be like, man, regardless of what's happening to the prices, everything on the ground that we need to happen is slowly happening. The companies are making more money. States are slowly reforming their laws. All of this good is happening. And so that's why I make these videos, so that I can reaffirm and show you what's actually happening on the ground, as opposed to just the distractions that's going to make you, sell early or move your investment right before we see some sort of institutions finally getting in. So very true, Surir, but you just try your best. And when you try your best and you're successful, then you get to the level of Ian Castle, truthfully. And what really matters in the States, we're seeing progress, and that these other legislative changes that we're anticipating and that are actually in the Senate and so closer than ever to pass, are again not a matter of if, just when. So I hope this has been a valuable episode for you all. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to start a discussion, but I also just want to thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this. Please leave a like if you got some value out of it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great day, everybody.